Hey everyone. Okay, it's been great. Thank you, Rhea, so much for confirming that. Yesterday was quite funny when I tried to do this. Don't know if you saw my post, but I thought I'd just spontaneously hop on and talk about strategies, which admittedly is a fairly large topic, and especially in relationship to oppression. And I did a beautiful meditation for 20 minutes and then looked and saw people said that they couldn't hear me. So that is all worked out now. Oh, and then I tried another one, and my partner walked in with his motorcycle gear on, and it was all very loud. So I completely let go um, of doing that yesterday. Super happy to be here today. It's a beautiful day out, and my kitty is going to be joining us, I think. So happy to be here. Hi, Megan. Hi, Rhea. And I have a couple questions for people who couldn't be here at the time because I'm connecting with people all over the world. So today I want to talk. Today I want to talk about strategies of belonging. And it's really interesting when you bring up a topic like this for anyone who's done multi-dimensional work. Now there's a cat on me. There she goes. All sorts of things will show up, right? Anytime you are getting prepared to do really core work, type of work that we do, almost endless things will show up to interrupt you. And I've just learned that over time. I always find it quite humorous. So May 1st, we have strategies of belonging starting. And we're going to be looking at oppression primarily. I'll be talking about oppression and in a very different way. I just took a trip along Google to see if anyone is thinking about this in a fresh way yet. And I couldn't find anything. I could find beautiful graphs, and I mean this, beautiful diagrams of intersectionality and colored graphs and you name it, so many lectures, so many treatises and theories, and it is all out there, right? Because the festering wound has been opened, which is what we're now living with, right? We're still in the festering, very much so. We haven't yet moved into the healing stage, although we're starting to, and that's why I'm doing this series. So we want to start looking at how do we heal this? And I don't mean decades of work, and I don't mean more talk, and I don't mean conflict resolution, and I don't mean any of this thinking stuff that we do. So today I'm going to talk pretty briefly about strategies and how that intersects with oppression. And then I want to get it straight to a somatic meditation so that we can actually do it. And then for anyone who's not here, I'm going to repost this and we'll be able to share this, which is great. So first of all, what do I mean by strategy? So anyone who knows my work already knows this, but it certainly doesn't help to hear it a lot. Certainly I could hear this a lot and keep learning it. Strategies happen originally when we are young and an overwhelming event happens. So we could say it's a traumatic event, but for some people, it doesn't end up as trauma. Why is that? Because when we're little and there's an overwhelming experience in our environment, if we are able to get to a safe adult and discharge the stress, the fear, the terror, the overwhelm, then we can become quite resilient and do very well. Trauma occurs when we are overwhelmed by events and we are not able to discharge or offload that. And we carry that then into adulthood. And usually we get involved in a lot of repetition wounds. We repeat certain events or seem to attract to ourselves certain events to repeat these things so that we can heal it, actually, so that we can bring it to resolution. How does this relate to strategies? When we have that form of an overwhelming event, we fragment into parts of self. And this fragmentation becomes our strategies. We have different strategies, and these strategies develop, and it's brilliant. They are absolutely brilliant. And the further along on your path of evolution and growth that you are, the more nuanced they become. They can seem tricky, actually. It can seem quite difficult to get at them, and that's exactly why I'm focusing there. So we develop these parts of self, and each part of self has strategies, numerous strategies. But we can come to also associate a strategy with a part, right? So a protective part, or the thinker part, or the caretaking part, right? And all of these are types of strategies that, when we are little, saved us. So they absolutely need to be honored and seen and understood that way. In the trauma to essence work, what I find repeatedly and predictably and reliably over and over again is that we're working in a field that has, which I'll show to you right now, that has a certain intelligence, if you will. It's an intelligent and conscious field. And when we interact with this, and all of this is on my website, of course, but when we interact with this somatic map or this somatic field, we're able to get in touch with, and again, not from the mental, not from thinking, not from theorizing. We quite literally get in touch with. We step onto the place of our core strategies, and we feel the strategy directly in our own body. And this shows up as thinking patterns, feeling patterns, and also patterns of sensation. So, for example, tightness in the chest, feeling like the throat is shutting down, crying, a feeling of being very big or very angry, right? There are these patterns that go along with each of these strategies. So the purpose of identifying a strategy, then later, right? So we're no longer children, now we're adults. The purpose of identifying your strategy is twofold. One is personal health. These strategies from childhood do not translate well to adulthood. Now, that's arguable, isn't it? Some of our strategies do translate well in the sense that, for example, I have a strategy of overworking. You could say that has actually, and I would say this, that has actually hugely helped me, right? Even in times of chronic illness, in times of more intensity around parenting, in times of difficulty and life's various adversities, I have a drive around my purpose. I have a drive around my work. And that is, in fact, a strategy. So if you take this as an example, that can then become workaholism. It can become an inability to rest. It can become an inability to balance everything in your life. So I think many of us know, right, how our strategies and our patterns that at some point may have been helpful in our adult lives are not so helpful. So when we look at these strategies within the context of this trauma to essence pathway, what happens, again, remarkably reliably, is that because how that field is set up, people, it's astonishing to me, people over and over again with such exquisite courage are able to stand in the place of their strategy and simply name it. It is quite amazing to me how time after time after time, people can step onto, they're literally stepping onto a piece of paper that has strategy written on it, step onto a piece of paper with the word strategy on it, and with grace and safety, this is key, safety, absolutely expose their core strategy. what otherwise would seem often very humiliating or shameful or far too risky to do, people are able to do in this trauma to essence path with incredible safety and I'll add humor. Much of the time when people step into this place of strategy, first they go through kind of the heaviness or the feelings, the thinking patterns. That usually takes less than 5 minutes. And then they take a look around at core wound and core essence and core self, and quite quickly we find the humor in it. Because actually strategies are very humorous because they do not match reality. So in that moment from our beautiful essential self, we can see that so clearly. Oh wow, my strategy is not even in line with present time reality. Okay, so let's get to the topic of oppression. Where does oppression come from? So I've already actually just laid out for you a certain context. And oppression is systemic social oppression I'm talking about, is able to take hold of us, if you will, because of our strategies of survival. So if a child has an overwhelming event, which almost all children do, I haven't met anyone who hasn't had this actually. If a child has an overwhelming event, either from parents or siblings or family, but then you must look at the outer circle. What is the circumstance that that family is living in? If a child, for whatever reason, has an overwhelming event and their need to express it, cry, tantrum, have temperature changes, shake, all the things that we look at in this work to discharge the stress, if they're not able to do that, they shut down, just like we do as adults. If we're not able to access our own nervous system's discharge as adults, we numb out, we shut down, we disassociate. That is prime territory for systemic oppression to take hold. And one of the things, this is the key, if all I did was talk about this is the key essential point right here, is that when we are not allowed to, there's my cat running around as I talk about this, when we are not allowed to express that fear or those hurt feelings when we are overwhelmed or being hurt, we internalize that across the board. This is true for everyone. We internalize that as, I am not good. I'm not good. I'm not loved. I'm not lovable. My feelings aren't okay. How I feel in my body isn't okay. The child's undeveloped brain cannot work through in a nuanced way at all. Oh, it's actually the adults around me and the culture I live in that's completely confused. This has nothing to do with me. For survival as children, in order to stay bonded, even if it's a trauma bond, in order to stay bonded to our caregivers, we will internalize that we are bad. They are good, so it must be us that's bad. And the moment you have millions of people who feel bad about themselves, who have forgotten their goodness, that is when systemic oppressions begin to work and have the very easy ability to take hold. Now, you have to have someone pretty chronically in their strategies or their shutdown. This is fascinating. I have to just say that my cat is a very, very passive cat. She never, ever, ever does this. And she is racing around the room in a way that I've literally never seen. So this is a very loaded topic, and I'm really aware of that. And I want to say this for your own learning, that when we decide to take on oppression, through a very direct connection to it, the environment around you is going to go into some chaos. And it's good to just expect that. I mean, honestly, it's not even that negative. It's good to just kind of, yeah, exactly, Megan. My cat is just crazed right now. It's so interesting. So it's not even bad. It's just good to expect that. And it's no different from what's happening on our planet. So, right, what I said earlier was like the festering wound has popped on our planet. And it's a rough time for a lot of us. So that's why I'm doing this series, the Strategies of Belonging. Not at all because we're here to just you, to heal racism, to heal sexism, to heal classism. That's absurd. That's the magical thinking of a child. No, because each of us does have the responsibility to heal ourselves, right? And to be able to access what we call systemic justice, not social justice. I actually don't fully think I understand what social justice is. I have ideas of what external forms of justice are, but I might get in trouble for saying this online, but I really have only seen systemic justice. And systemic justice, I'm not talking about entanglement. Systemic justice is when we ourselves learn to step away from the trauma field of oppression and empower ourselves, right? So I can only take care of myself, and then in turn have a really profound effect on my child's friends, the people around me, my partner, my relationships, right? That's the ripple effect. And that's how we bring resolution, actually, right? So any questions, just put them in about any of it. What's the strategy? What strategies do you have? What strategies have you noticed? I got a question from someone yesterday who couldn't be here, so I'm going to read that. And we're going to kind of do a little bit of the heady stuff and that. And then if there's not much of that, we're going to go right into a meditation. And so again, I'm just laying a little foundation because the mind does need to know what we're working with, right? And on May 1st, the first of the series will be where I really lay out and give you some visuals as well on how to look at oppression through a systemic lens. Because believe it or not, all of that information that we're still being exposed to and that's online, and I mean, thank God that all this information is out there now. I mean, truly, right? So grateful for that. And as people who do systemic work, systemic therapists, clients doing systemic healing work, transgenerational healing work, multidimensional work, we know that it has to be in the body. It does absolutely nothing to be thinking about this. In fact, thinking about it and gathering more information actually adds to the trauma field most of the time. I don't feel I can say all of the time, but the vast majority of the time, more content, more trauma field, right? So think about what you've been learning about racism the past few years, certainly if you live in America, right? So think about what you're learning about racism. Every single person I know is exhausted now, absolutely drained, because as the festering wound popped and needed to open, we did not have the physical, the somatic tools for healing it. And that's what this whole series is about. So let's just see here. Synchronicity for me is I'm at the choice point of stepping away from a system which is traumatic and unjust. Yes, great. I'm super glad to hear that. I've been expecting a certain system I'm involved in is about to go into complete chaos. Yeah, I get that. You know what the truth is? All of our systems are going into chaos. If you can manage, because I know you know this lingo, if you can manage to get your attention out of the trauma field, out of the oppression, and into the generative field, which we're going to do a meditation of here in a few minutes. If you manage to do that, chaos can just go loose and you don't need to be part of it, right? So that's what I've found. There is a lot of chaos around, and I just find that I'm kind of in a cocoon, right? Effectively responding now and not sucked in. Let me just read a question here. Is this making sense? Is this making sense to people? I think it is. I think we all know this in our heart, to be honest. Okay. Let's see. So someone who just did a Trauma to Essence group with me knew I was doing this and couldn't come. And so she said, after doing that work, and she had an incredibly huge shift from that was so beautiful and is, of course, also kind of stirring things up, I'm noticing a sort of hypervigilance in looking for strategies in my day-to-day life. It's illuminating, but I sense this could become exhausting too. Yeah, for sure. And almost feels like a strategy in and of itself. Analyzing, fixing, I wonder if you could speak to that. Absolutely. So that's exactly what I mean by more content initially, if we're not in the generative field, if we're still in the trauma field, instead of the generative field, content around difficult things and certainly strategies, it just feeds the trauma field, just feeds it. And I'm actually going to be giving diagrams and breaking down the structural energetics behind depression, because this is information we really need, right? Somatic and energetic information about what is actually happening. How are we hooked up to oppression? So yes, in the beginning, as you become aware of this, if we're not returning, right, a balance of attention, returning to objective witness, returning to core self, where we can easily just be aware, then it can become exhausting. And what's happening with this person who asked this is exactly that. She's finding that she has a strategy on top of those strategies. And that's true for everyone. So as you do this work, you'll kind of find layers. But what's important is that as you do this type of work and you're finding those layers, that at the same time, you're finding the compassion, the neutrality, the witness, the awareness, right? So that information or the insight about strategies actually becomes what I call core drive. So in the Trauma to Essence work, we move from core strategy to core drive, and then up to core self. And it's the awareness, so it's the exposing of the strategy that then feeds a very healthy core drive when we unveil the positive side of the strategy. Because our strategies, right, because of all of these parts of self, our strategies have quite immense energy in them. They have power, they're very potent. They hold, certainly at the beginning, the first few years, our strategies and parts are the majority of our psyche, actually, right? So we're looking for that drive that's underneath the strategy. And we're looking for that movement into self so that it's not the strategy in control of our psyche anymore. Okay. Cat's still going. Is that Megan? Is my cat interacting with you? Okay. So let's go ahead and do this. And I never pre-write these things. I never know. I'm just responding, right? That's what this work is about. I'm just responding in the moment to who's here and what's called for and what's needed. So we'll do this meditation, and then afterwards there may be some questions or comments. Rhea says, I'm understanding that when you say systemic oppression, some of this is built into the system, which we know as society, and is acted out unconsciously, automatically. Some of the oppression is consciously constructed and used by groups within society controls others. That is precisely it. So systemic oppression is the entity, the social entities outside of us, the systems outside of us. And then, of course, there can be trauma. I don't call it oppression, but trauma that happens within the family system that's in that oppressive system. And then for the children, if we're unable to stay connected with our own resilience and our own goodness, then that's when we become vulnerable to those larger systemic oppressions. It's why we also oppress. So a very big reason I'm doing this series is because anyone here, I'm just going to say it, anyone here probably has enough privilege that we are also in oppressor roles. It's extremely difficult. I've watched, actually everyone I know, I've watched my whole country try to figure out this whole thing around racism of being racist or being oppressive. It's really hard to get a grasp on our strategies that aren't so pretty, right? And that are so chronic because of the culture we were born into and so many generations of it that we can't even feel it. And so the trauma to essence map and what we'll be doing, those three groups, is we will be feeling it, right? So we will be in relationship, the first one is racism, in relationship to racism. We will literally feel our own core wound in relationship to racism, and then our own core strategy in a really safe way in relationship to racism, and then core self and core essence in relationship to racism. So that's how that interlocks, that personal and those larger systematic and systemic oppressions. And I really want to name here, I think you all know this, but I want to name that it is by design. It's by design, right? So this affects our parenting. So if you think about this, right, since it's the children who are the ones who are vulnerable to this, and then we grew into adults with all this oppressive stuff that we didn't offload. I mean, I'm going to be digging into all that and unpacking it in a few weeks, but it's the children actually, right, who are vulnerable to this. So it's an innocence and there's no blame, but we need to get it out. Yeah, we do all have these. It's true, Rhea. Okay. So take a deep breath. You can shut your eyes or watch. It doesn't matter what you're doing. I have my eyes shut most of the time, and then sometimes I'll open them. But this is where we just want to take a very deep, palpable breath. And I'm going to lead you through a guided inner constellation, inner meditation. But I really want you breathing and feeling your body. So important. This is all about feeling the body, this work. Good. The kitty is very calm now, by the way. She's curled up so calmly in her little kitty bed. It's very sweet. Usually she sits right behind me when I'm doing healing work with people. She loves it. Okay. Okay, so something is coming to me that's different today, no surprise. So I want you to go ahead and from where you're sitting, directly in front of you, I want you to see, imagine, feel, sense. I want you to see the part of you that knows you've always been good, no matter what. You've always been good. And from where you're sitting for now, to the left, in front of you, at just the right distance in front of you, I want you to see your core strategy. And just breathe and feel. Keep feeling your body. And the next piece, you can do this moving. You're free to move if you want. I do suggest to people to physically do this when possible, or you can do it in the inner image. But you're going to stand up and you're going to step in to the part of you that knows they've always been good. And when you step into that part of yourself and that area of your psyche, your field, just breathe and feel. And really notice what happens with your breath, what happens with your body. Are you able to fully step into that part? Part of you that always knows you've been good no matter what, that you've always been doing your best, given what you had. Always. What does that feel like? What does your body feel like there? Notice where your attention goes when you're in that part of your field. Are your eyes closed, open? Where do you want to look? Where does your attention want to go? Do you feel little or big? Sometimes it's difficult to feel a part, so just notice that. Notice if it feels unavailable, distanced, obscured in some way. Good. So we're going to move now out of that part as though you're taking off a sweater. You want to separate out completely, separate your energy out from that part. And when you sit back down, even if you're doing this in your mind's eye inside, imagining it, it's the same movement. When you stand or sit back in your first place where you started, I want that now to be your core self. So you're stepping into your core self. And again, breathing, feeling that in your body. How is it different? Always, always give your brain that important feedback. How is it different now? This is an important moment when you step back into your core self and noticing difference. Many people have this strategy of wanting more than is available in that moment. We're all so overwhelmed and overstimulated and in a trance from cultural oppression, actually, around mental health and all of the stimulation and online and devices and everything that look at what movies need to have now, that we need extreme experiences to be able to notice something. That's one of the consequences of oppression. And so in this work, when you step back into your core self or you go out into a part, you want to always immediately notice what feels different. And even if it's subtle, you want to notice that. So for example, let's say I get back into my core self and I have kind of 5 seconds, right, or a second of spaciousness or relief, or my belly is full, or my breath is deeper. That is huge, that shift. In that moment, you've stepped out of the trauma field and you've stepped out of social oppression, which is a huge step that most people will never have the chance to make. And so we need to immediately name that. Strategies of the mind don't like that kind of change because the whole point behind oppression is we've been told in a million different ways that it's not safe to go against oppression. It's not safe. Don't do it. You will die or you'll be killed. So we have strategies that will immediately come in and obscure any positive regenerative shift. And we'll kind of look for something bigger. Okay. So again, just feeling core self. And I don't even really need to even bring it in because we're talking about oppression, right? So to some degree, what we're doing right now will be in relationship to oppression. It's in the field, it's in the room, if you will. Okay, so you're going to step now into your core strategy. And same, just be curious, be open. People are often very surprised when they meet their core strategy directly without thinking about it. So you just step into your core strategy. Take a breath, feel your body, and really notice. Every time I do this, my core strategy is more clear to me. And again, so just notice any thinking patterns, any muscle patterns, tension, posture, any physical patterns that come with that, any feelings that come with it. And so I just ask you, in your strategy, what do you want? And so I'm asking your core strategy, what do you want? And just notice. And how would getting what you want serve you? And another question, how long have you been here? So I'm asking your core strategy, how long have you been here? And just notice. I can always feel when I'm in core strategy that comes from someplace before me. That my core strategy and many of my strategies are transgenerational. I've inherited them. I learned. I learned these strategies. Not all of my strategies, but I learned my strategies from and within my family system in response to the larger systemic oppressions around the family. Okay, good. So just let your strategy know. It's always really important, by the way, I find with strategy, to let your strategy know, I'll be back. Because our strategies really aren't, they're not going anywhere. And the point is to include everything. So again, right? Where does peace begin? It truly begins inside. That's just real. That's not some slogan. Peace must begin inside, and so we include our strategies. We see them for what they are, truly, and how they helped us. And we open our arms to that. We open our arms to all of the parts of ourselves that we don't like, that we fear, that we think are ugly or unlovable. All of it belongs. And so again, as though you're kind of taking off a sweater, you want to leave your core strategy there completely and separate out and come back to core self. And feel how it's different. Feel how you feel different now in core self. Feel if somehow it's sticky. Maybe your strategy kind of followed you. Feel if it feels very, you feel individuated, you feel differentiated from these parts. Core self has attributes, just like all our parts do, and we get to know our core self. And as we return to our core self, it builds and builds. Beautiful. So if you're here and you want to, you can let me know how some of that went for you. I can say that for myself, because I do it, right? As I'm guiding it, that it was actually very easy for me to notice and move into the part of me that knows that I'm good and always has been. Then I came back. My core always feels stronger after I've moved out to a part. And with strategy, very clear. It is always so calming to me to just, with full permission, see and feel and meet with my strategy. And again, to be clear, we have countless strategies, but we also have a core strategy. And when we get to know that core strategy that all the other strategies fall under, then you don't need to deal with the content of a million different strategies, right? So I strongly recommend bypassing all the work around content and more content. And instead, put your attention on how to get out of the trauma field and how to maintain being out of the trauma field and become deeply familiar with the feeling of not being bonded to the trauma field. Put all your attention on that. So at the end, I felt both individuated and integrated with my parts. Beautiful. That's it, exactly. Individuation is actually, individuation feels exactly like that. We both feel completely connected and individuated. And that is a healthy boundary. So that feeling is of huge importance. Feeling the joyousness and goodness, and also seeing the goodness in my core strategy. That's it. Yeah, that's it. Perfect. My core self felt peace and then truly tranquil at the end and grounded. Love it. Yeah, that's it. Great. So that's the movement, Megan. That's the movement right there. You've got it. So that's the pathway. And as soon and I want to confirm for all of you, it is that simple. Really confirming that for you. It is actually that simple. Okay? So I hear all the time from people like, what? How could it be that simple? Why didn't anyone tell me? Right? I'm going to tell you why no one told you. Because of oppression. Okay? So most people don't have accurate information on how oppression works. Once we have that, it's real simple. Beautiful. Realize that, let me see. Realize that part of my core strategy is to shut down part of myself while my core self is full. That's it. Yeah, absolutely. I have the same. I have that strategy as well. I'm guessing all of us can relate to that, right? A strategy that absolutely a strategy around shutting down. So in the somatic listening, I'll say something about that. In the somatic listening work that I teach, those of us in the community, we kind of end up having a lingo, right? And a piece of our lingo is, yeah, I'm shut down. And we know what that means. Oh, you need to get yourself into a somatic listening session and discharge that feeling. Yeah. Oppression shuts us down. Yes. Okay. Let's see. Elizabeth, opposite to what I expected. Tight in throat and part that knows I'm good. Yep. Did not like that place. I get it. Let's talk about that. Felt I didn't know or remember that part. Tight in belly and core self, most at ease and centered in core strategy. Okay, super good to notice that. Very odd. I will meditate on that. Meaning, we'll read to the exercise to see if it comes out different. Okay, Elizabeth, here's what I want to say about that, and thank you so much for bringing that. This is a very common experience. I've had this experience a lot, okay? So, very common when we're working in this deep, deep, deep core field of the psyche, especially in the beginning, but even years later, this can happen, okay? And I want to let you know it is not bad at all. You cannot get this work wrong. There's not a wrong when you follow it in this way that I'm teaching it, right? Where we get out to a part and quite the opposite happens. So briefly, right? And again, I'll go way deeper into this in the series, but briefly, when we're doing parts work, and we're saying yes to our psyche, which is what we're doing right now, right? What happens commonly is that a more important part will show itself. So that's what's happening with you, okay? And trust it. Absolutely trust that. So I've had that a lot, opposite to what I expected. That's why I try to let people know, let yourself be surprised, because you could be surprised a lot. Yeah, so that part, that tightness in the throat, I'm going to suggest that part of you that knows she's good and always has been good could use some love, could use some holding, okay, from your core self. Yeah. So again, the beauty of the strategy, right? Most centered and at ease in core strategy. I love that. Thanks for bringing that, because we are. Everyone here, everyone I know, we are most at ease in our strategy. That's the whole point, right? That's why people aren't flocking to do the true deep somatic work. So you will find many, many, many people who read or who do trainings or go from therapist to therapist to therapist. These are all strategies. All of that is strategy. To find the core work, to do the core work, to meet the actual physical sensation directly. You're doing it, Elizabeth. That's it. So that was all perfect. And like you say, do it again. But I want to just tweak that a little bit. I want to suggest that you don't be curious. You might be saying this, be curious if it comes out different. No fixing around it. Yeah, comfy and strategy, exactly. Anna, it's super nice to see you here. I love that. Same, it was easy to move on the goodness. When came out of strategy, it felt sticky. Yep. Like I was naked, but feeling how strategy was still part of my core, but in a more open and grateful opportunity to see, have both. That's it. So everything that you all are noticing here in the nuances, that's the work, okay? That's how to do the work. And you can repeat this on your own, okay? And I strongly recommend that you do. So when we first do this type of somatic work and we're moving back to core self, or we're moving, what we'll notice is that kind of stickiness. We notice this kind of like, oh, but that part shouldn't necessarily feel that way, or right? And what we're seeing there is undifferentiated selves, undifferentiated psyche, which everyone has until you do this type of work. So parts merge, strategies merge, and all of that also merges or inundates our essential self or our core self. And becoming sovereign means not only becoming sovereign in our family or becoming sovereign with entities or beings or becoming sovereign spiritually, or right, becoming sovereign, what it actually means is becoming sovereign in your own psyche. That's what it means. Being able to access when you want, when it's needed, living from core self. So instead of living out in our parts and visiting core self, right, which is where most of us are at, we live in our core self, and as needed in a way that is individuated, we have the discernment to know when we want or need a part. Okay? So for example, I don't live all the time in the part of me that's a healer or therapist. If I did that, every time I walk by someone on the street, I'd be telling them, oh, you need to open your crown chakra or your heart's not open, right? That kind of undifferentiated. No, right? I go into a part. It's not it's conscious now, but it wasn't when I started decades ago, but I go into a part that is aligned, right, with specific attributes of helping. Otherwise, right, I relax back into my core self. And as you do this work of core self, then moving out, core self, moving out, core self, and the trauma to essence work, of course, that whole somatic map is built around this. Very rapidly, your core self will become individuated. So this is I want to remind you guys, this is very big work. This is the work, okay? So this is Jung talking about individuation. This is Bert Hellinger talking about blind love, the love of a child, that's a strategy, versus enlightened love, okay? This is really big work. And I want to confirm for you, you don't need to do the small work. I actually really mean that. So in my lifetime, decades ago, I needed to do the depth psychology analysis for years, the content work, because I was going to be a teacher. So we need to do that in a certain way. If we're going to go then teach people or help people, we need to be very clear on our strategies, but we certainly don't need to relive them, and we don't need to tell a story about it. We need to do just what we did today, which is drop in, feel it, note it, answer those questions I asked, the different questions about how long have you been here, what do you want, that type of thing, and then come back to core self. There's a lot of movement, yes. Okay. And Megan, I also feel the fatigue of the last 2 weeks or so has lifted after meditation. Great. I'm so happy to hear that. That is huge. Yes, it does. That's the individuation. That's the discernment and differentiation. That's having boundaries. Okay. So then, Megan, something to be lightly, and I mean that, curious about is kind of like, when do I feel exhausted? When do I feel drained? And starting to track that, right, as a pattern in your life. This is for everyone, of course, but you brought it up in terms of, where's my attention going right now? Where am I hooked up, right? Is my attention going to transgenerational trauma, family trauma, ancestral trauma? Is it going to collective trauma, world trauma, right? So for those of us who are sensitive, which you are, for those of us who are sensitive, we absolutely have to have a mantra going on in the background. What am I connected to right now? What am I connected to? And this is always about being over-connected. So if you find that you get tired, what we just saw was really important, like, whoa, it lifted after that movement you just made. That tells you a lot. Yep, Elizabeth says, indeed, just being aware will do. Good, good. Good. I'm glad to hear that, Rhea. Yeah, simplicity is it, right? I tell people all the time, my tagline is see what is essential. There's a reason for that. It's really real. It's I repeat this over and over and over again. The resolution is simple. If it's anything beyond just kind of a one sentence or one movement, if it starts to spin out into further conflict or content, that's interesting. I said that content equals conflict. Content equals conflict, right? So if we start to spin out into further layers of content and conflict, that's trauma field. You will notice that every time you're in the generative field, it is simple. It is simple and differentiated. Beautiful. All right, you guys, that's our time today. Any last anything, let me know. Just write it to me here. I'm glad, really glad to have this time with you. And I'm going to do this again in a week. I'm going to do it, let me make sure I'm saying the right thing. I'm going to do this at 4 p.m. Pacific time. Again, oh, I changed it because a whole bunch of people couldn't do it. So for you lovely Aussies, you will be able to see it on my Facebook page, but I'm actually going to do it at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, because there's entire other countries that can't make it to this, and I want to be able to meet with them as well. Profound yet simple thank you. Thank you so much, you guys. Really my pleasure. Okay, take good care. Just reading Anna's last. While I was on strategy, my body feels exhausting, like I'm trying to distance myself of the other. Yeah. It was great to connect with you too. Thanks, Anna. Bye-bye.